It was 7:43 a.m. on a Wednesday when they came for me. The sun had barely crested the rooftops of Maple Grove, a suburban enclave I'd called home for 8 months, when the front door exploded inward with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. I was halfway through a cup of black coffee, still in my boxers, the bitter brew scalding my tongue as I jolted upright. 5 figures stormed in, clad in beige tactical vests, armed with clipboards and a laminated rulebook strapped to a makeshift riot shield fashioned for what looked like a repurposed windshield. Their voices were a cacophony of shrill commands, something about my mailbox being non-compliant in hue, but all I could think was, I've served VY-Ved ambushes in Fallujah less theatrical than this. Barefoot, bleary-eyed, and clutching my mug like a lifeline, I stood there as they fanned out across my Lee VY-ing room. One Efthimo wiry guy with a buzz cut and a badge that read Porch Patrol Captain snapped photos of my coffee table like it was EVY Denke in a murder trial. Another, a woman with a perm so tight it could have doubled as a helmet, scribbled furiously on her clipboard, muttering about unauthorized window treatments. I'd moved to Maple Grove for peace after 22 years and the Marines retired at 45 with a bum knee and a pension I'd earned in sweat and blood. I wanted quiet streets, a cold beer on my porch, maybe a dog someday. Instead, I got Vanessa Hargrove. Vanessa wasn't just the president of the Maple Grove Homeowners Association. She was its dictator, its high priestess, its self-appointed god emperor. She didn't win the title through votes. She seized it through some unholy suburban alchemy, a blend of intimidation, bureaucracy, and a smile so sharp it could slice through steel. Her auburn hair was always swept into a low bun, her eyes glinted like a hawk's, and her wardrobe consisted solely of pressed khakis and polos embroidered with the HOA's crest, a stylized maple leaf crossed with a ruler. From the moment I rolled into this neighborhood in my beat-up Tacoma, she'd marked me as a threat. "You didn't trim your hedges to regulation height," she'd said at our first encounter, her tone dripping with the smug authority of a mall cop who'd just caught you jaywalking. I'd shrugged, thinking she'd tire herself out eventually. I was wrong. That Wednesday morning was the tipping point. I'd installed a motion sensor light above my garage a week earlier, nothing fancy, just a cheap LED from Home Depot to scare off the raccoons that kept raiding my trash. It was legal, wired to code, and entirely within my property line. But to Vanessa, it was a declaration of war. She'd rallied her HOA compliance task force, a squad of middle-aged busybodies with too much time and a Costco membership, and they descended on my house like a SWAT team raiding a drug den. They didn't knock. They didn't ring the bell. They kicked the door in, citing emergency aesthetic oversight, and proceeded to catalog my life like I was a suspect in a heist. Excessive exterior illumination. One of them barked, pointing at the light like it was a smoking gun. Unapproved structural modification. Another shouted, gesturing at a birdhouse I'd nailed to my oak tree. They even cited me for patriotic overreach because I'd hung an American flag on my porch for Veterans Day flag I'd carried through 3 deployments, now apparently a blight on Maple Grove's pristine uniformity. By the time they left, my door was dangling from its hinges, my coffee was cold, and I was holding a stack of citations thicker than a phone book. I called the real cops, who showed up an hour later, took one look at the scene, and chuckled. "Vanessa's at it again," one of them said, shaking his head. "Last week, she found a guy for VYing a disruptive welcome mat. Good luck, man." That was the moment I decided I wasn't just going to serve VYVE Vanessa Hargrove, I was going to fight back. Maple Grove wasn't always a battlefield. When I'd signed the papers 8 months ago, it seemed like paradise. Manicured lawns, kids on bikes, streets lined with towering maples that turned crimson every fall. The real estate agent had handed me a glossy brochure that smelled faintly of lavender and promised a community of harmony and order. I'd bought the 2-bedroom rancher site unseen, cashing out my SAVYNGS for a fresh start after the Corps chewed me up and spit me out. I'd spent 2 decades dodging bullets and IEDs. I figured I could handle a quiet suburb. But beneath the surface, Maple Grove was a pressure cooker. Vanessa had ruled the HOA for 3 years, turning a volunteer board into her personal fiefdom. She didn't just enforce rules, she invented them, wielding the bylaws like a sledgehammer. Residents lived in fear of her patrols, her fines, her relentless quest for Soul cohesion. She'd once issued a DULA 200 penalty to a widow for planting tulips that clashed with the neighborhood's approved color palette. Another time, she demanded a family remove their basketball hoop because the sound of dribbling disturbed the auditory environment. By the time I moved in, most people had either bent the knee or moved out. I was the new guy, the wild card, and Vanessa saw me as a crack in her perfect facade. The morning after the raid, I sat on my porch, sipping a fresh coffee and staring at the splintered doorframe. The citation sat on the table beside me, a litany of nonsense: failure to submit lighting proposal, unsanctioned VY in habitat, flagpole height violation. I could have paid the fines due law 450 total and gone back to my quiet life. But something about the way they'd stormed in, the sheer audacity of it, lit a fuse in me I hadn't felt since my last tour. I'd faced down insurgents with AK-47s. I wasn't about to let a woman with a clipboard and a power trip run me out of my own house. That night, I called in the cavalry. I kept in touch with a few buddies from my unit, guys who'd seen me through the worst of it and come out the other side. Over beers in my backyard, I laid out the situation. There was Riley, still active duty, a 6'4" wall of muscle with a buzz cut and a stare that could stop a tank. Then came Ortiz, our old logistics guru, a wiry guy with a knack for turning chaos into order and a reigning champion of our unit's prank wars. Finally, there was Hayes, the quiet one, a demolitions expert who'd once disarmed a car bomb with a Leatherman and a prayer. They listened as I recounted the raid, their faces hardening with every detail. 5 of them kicked in your door over a light, Riley said, cracking his knuckles. I've cleared compounds with less drama. Ortiz grinned, already plotting. Sounds like we've got a hostile command structure here. We can work with that. Hayes just nodded, sipping his beer. You want her gone? I want my damn porch back, I said. And maybe her sanity while we're at it. Riley leaned forward, eyes glinting in the firelight. Then we're in. Operation HOA Hellfire starts now. Before we launched our counteroffensive, I needed intel. Vanessa's next move would depend on how she read my response or lack thereof, so I decided to play dumb and dig deeper. The following Saturday, I attended the monthly HOA meeting held in Vanessa's sprawling backyard under a banner that read, Unity through Uniformity. Her task force flanked her like bodyguards, clipboards at the ready, while she stood at a podium, rattling off an agenda that included shrubbery density standards, driveway stain protocols, and a proposal to ban all porch decorations with non-neutral emotional resonance. I sat in the back, nodding along, a pen and notebook in hand like I was just another compliant neighbor. When I raised my hand to ask about the break and framing it as a polite question about community safety procedures, Vanessa's smile tightened. That was a necessary intervention, she said, her voice smooth as polished glass. Unapproved modifications threaten our collective integrity. Someone in the front row clapped, a wiry guy with glasses I later learned was her second-in-command, Greg Sidewalk Sergeant Pearson. I jotted it down, along with the names of her other lieutenants. Linda Mailbox Monitor Voss and Carl Lawn Length Enforcer Tatum. The meeting dragged on for 2 hours, and by the end, I had a clearer picture. Vanessa wasn't just a control freak, she was a machine, and her task force was her gears. Back home, I briefed the team. Riley set up surveillance, rigging my porch with a pair of discrete trail cams we'd used on night ops in Afghanistan. Ortiz hacked into the HOA's public Google Calendar amateur security, no two-factor authentication, and started messing with their schedule, renaming events to things like Mandatory Conformity Seminar and Annual Grass Blade Counting. Hayes, meanwhile, posed as a prospective buyer, touring the neighborhood with a realtor to map Vanessa's patrol routes. She ran her task force like clockwork, 6 a.m., 2 p.m., and 7:30 p.m., always in groups of 3, rolling through the streets in a golf cart decked out with LED lights and a megaphone. We started small. Riley planted a decoya bright red garden gnome holding a tiny live free or die flag in my front yard, just VY Cybele from the street. It wasn't against any written rule, but we knew it'd get under Vanessa's skin. Sure enough, the next morning, her patrol screeched to a halt outside my house. Linda hopped out, clipboard in hand, and scribbled a citation for provocative lawn ornamentation. Carl took photos, zooming in on the gnome's defiant grin. Vanessa didn't say a word, just stared at me through my window, her lips a thin line. I waved back, sipping my coffee. Phase 1. Provocation achieved. Vanessa's tyranny wasn't unique to me. As we dug deeper, I started meeting her other VY Tims. There was Ellen, a single mom, fined Dula $150 for letting her kid draw chalk flowers on the driveway, VY Sewell clutter, Vanessa called it. Down the street, a retired mechanic named Tom had been hit with a Dula $300 penalty for parking his VY Tage Mustang in his own garage with the door open, an aesthetic vehicle exposure. Then there was Mr. Patel, a soft-spoken widower who'd gotten a warning for Leah VY ing his Diwali lights up past December 1 SD seasonal overreach. Vanessa didn't just rule through rules. She ruled through exhaustion, grinding people down until they complied or cracked. The turning point came when I met Marjorie Klein. She was a 70-year-old firecracker who'd lived in Maple Grove since the Nixon administration. She'd served on the HOA board back when it was just a group of neighbors swapping potluck recipes, not a paramilitary outfit. I knocked on her door one evening, and she answered in a faded Rolling Stones t-shirt, a glass of bourbon in hand. "If this is about that damn gnome," she said, squinting at me, "I hope it's GIVYing Vanessa a heart attack." I laughed. "It's a start. I'm Jack Tanner. I'm guessing you're not her biggest fan." "Fan?" Marjorie snorted. "That woman's a dictator with a tape measure. Come in, IVE got something you'll want to see." Her Lee VYing room was a time capsule. Shag carpet, wood-paneled walls, and a parrot named Mick who screeched order is chaos every 10 minutes. She hauled out a cardboard box stuffed with old HOA records, meeting minutes, budgets, original bylaws from the 90s. We spent hours sifting through it, Mick squawking in the background, until we hit gold. Vanessa had rewritten half the bylaws 3 years ago without a quorum vote. She'd also funneled Dula 6,000 of HOA dues into enforcement enhancements, tactical vests, walkie-talkies, even a custom paint job for the golf cart. It wasn't just unethical, it was embezzlement. Marjorie grinned, tapping the papers with a chipped fingernail. She thinks she's untouchable. Let's prove her wrong. With Marjorie on board, our resistance took shape. She became our legal brain, poring over statutes and drafting complaints. Riley upgraded our surveillance, wiring the gnome with a hidden GoPro to catch Vanessa's patrols in 4K. Ortiz started a whisper campaign, slipping anonymous notes under doors. "Tired of the fines? Meet at 112 Elm Street, Friday, 8 p.m. Hayes kept mapping, pinpointing weak spots in Vanessa's empire, like the fact that Greg, her right-hand man, was secretly terrified of confrontation. Friday night, 12 neighbors showed up at my place. Ellen brought cookies. Tom brought a six-pack. Mr. Patel brought a quiet fury that matched my own. We laid out the EVY Denke, the illegal bylaws, the misused funds, the footage of Vanessa's crew stomping across my lawn during the light fiasco. By the end, we had a plan and a name. We were the Maple Grove Liberation Front, and we were done playing nice. Vanessa didn't take the gnome lightly. 2 days later, I woke to find a new citation taped to my mailbox, unauthorized surveillance to VYC detected. She'd spotted the GoPro or guessed it was there and upped the ante. That afternoon, her golf cart rolled by, megaphone blaring. Residents are reminded that all exterior modifications require prior approval. Non-compliance will result in escalated measures. The escalated measures arrived the next morning. A tow truck hauling away my Tacoma, impounded for improper parking alignment despite being in my own driveway. That was when Lucas showed up. He lived 3 blocks over, a lanky guy with a beard down to his chest, and a garage full of tech that'd make the NSA jealous. He rolled up in a beat-up Jeep, a drone buzzing overhead, and introduced himself with a handshake and a grin. Heard you're taking on Vanessa. I'm ingot a Wi-Fi jammer disguised as a birdbath and a drone fleet ready to roll. Just don't ask about the bunker under my shed. I didn't ask. I just nodded. Welcome aboard. Lucas's drones gave us eyes in the sky, tracking Vanessa's every move. His jammer disrupted her task force's walkie-talkies, turning their patrols into a comedy of static and confusion. Meanwhile, Marjorie filed a formal request for financial transparency with the county, citing HOA statutes Vanessa couldn't dodge. The response came back a week later. Vanessa had blocked it, claiming executive PRI-VY leg. Marjorie forwarded it to the county anyway, and the cracks in Vanessa's armor started to widen. But she wasn't going down quietly. One night, Riley's cams caught her task force planning signs around the neighborhood. Compliance zone authorized personnel only. The next morning, a flyer appeared in every mailbox, printed on neon green paper. Emergency HOA lockdown initiated. All residents must submit to aesthetic inspections by 5 p.m. Friday or face penalties. It was nonsense. Such rule existed, but it worked. People panicked. Ellen scrubbed her driveway with bleach. Tom hid his Mustang in a friend's garage. Mr. Patel took down his bird feeder, muttering apologies to the sparrows. Vanessa rolled through at noon, golf cart now painted matte black, megaphone blasting a looped recording of her voice. Order is safety. Compliance is community. Greg and Linda trailed her, handing out citations like confetti. She was doubling down, betting fear would keep her in power. She didn't know we were ready to call her bluff. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Lucas, digging through public records, found a bombshell. Vanessa had a side hustle called Hearth Va Harmony, a company selling lifestyle enforcement product scandals, coasters, even a Dulaw 50 Suburban Serenity journal. The kicker? She'd used Dulaw 8,000 of HOA funds to bankroll it, disguising the expenses as community enhancement supplies. One invoice, buried in Marjorie's files, showed Dulaw 1,204 Hearth Va Harmony promotional banners, the same banners she'd hung at every meeting. We had her. Fraud, misuse of funds, illegal bylaws. It was enough to bury her. But we needed a stage. Marjorie invoked an obscure HOA rule. Any member could call an emergency meeting with 10 signatures. We got 50. The meeting was set for Saturday, 6 p.m. in the community center. Lucas printed the evidence emails, invoices, receipts, and we planned to drop it like a grenade. Vanessa showed up late, striding in with a leather binder and a candle labeled Eternal Order. She wore a navy blazer, her hair pulled back, so tight it looked painful. The room was packed 80 residents, more than half the neighborhood. She tried to take the podium, but Marjorie beat her to it, voice steady as she read the charges. Unauthorized bylaw amendments. Financial misconduct. Personal enrichment at our expense. She passed out copies of the evidence, and the crowd went silent, then erupted. Vanessa shouted over them. This is a coup. I've kept this neighborhood pristine. But her lieutenants Greg, Linda, Carl shifted uncomfortably, eyes on the floor. Then she played her last card. She pulled out her phone, dialed, and said, "Activate the contingency." Minutes later, her task force rolled up outside, planting more signs. Lockdown enforced, obey or vacate. It was chaos, pure and simple, a final flex of a dying regime. But Riley stepped forward, badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Vanessa Hargrove," he said, voice calm but ironclad. "I'm with the county sheriff's office. You're under investigation for fraud and impersonation of authority. Stand down." She froze, binders slipping from her hands. The crowd held its breath as Riley pulled out zip, ties not dramatic, just practical. "This isn't about candles," he said, securing her wrists. "It's about everything else." She didn't fight, just slumped as he let her out. The applause started slow, then roared a release of years of pent-up rage. The election was a formality. Marjorie won in a landslide, promising to gut the bylaws and refund the misused dues. Vanessa's candle empire collapsed. Turns out citrus citation didn't sell well outside Maple Grove. She faced charges, pleaded out, and moved to a condo downtown, last I heard. We threw a block party that weekend, no rules, just grills and music. The gnome got a permanent spot on my lawn, a silent sentinel. I sat back with a beer, watching kids chase fireflies, and felt something I hadn't in years, peace. Vanessa had kicked in my door, but we'd kicked down her throne. And in Maple Grove, the only order now was the kind we chose for ourselves. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.